The red warning lights flashed across the metal walls of the Dragon Bay. Taeho Kim wiped sweat from his forehead as he stared at the massive creature before him. The space dragon was 30 feet long and covered in dark scales that sparkled. With tiny electronic circuits, thick cables ran from its neck and spine into the wall sockets. The beast's eyes were closed, but Taeho could see its chest rising and falling with each breath. Taeho had been working on alien ships for 3 years now. The Vorthok Empire hired very few humans, but they needed people who understood Earth technology. Most of the ship's systems were a mix of alien engineering and stolen human designs. Taeho was one of only 3 humans aboard the massive research vessel called Vortex Pride. He checked his tablet again. The power readings from Dragon Unit 47 were all wrong. The electrical flow should have been steady, but the numbers kept jumping up and down. Something was making the Dragon's biomechanical systems work too hard. Is there a problem, human? The voice behind him was deep and rough. Taeho turned to see Krexnine, his Vorthok supervisor. The alien stood 8 feet tall, with gray-green skin and yellow eyes. Like all Vortex, he had small horns on his forehead and sharp teeth that showed when he spoke. The power levels are unstable, Taeho said, holding up his tablet. Dragon Unit 47 is drawing 30% more energy than normal. The neural implants might be overloading. Krexnine's yellow eyes narrowed. The Dragon units are working fine. Your job is to maintain the electrical systems, not question our biotechnology. But sir, if the implants are damaged, the dragon could what? Krexnine stepped closer. His breath smelled like metal and chemicals. These creatures are weapons, human. They do what we tell them to do, nothing more. Taeho looked back at the dragon. He had given it the nickname Ember because of the way its scales glowed red when it was powered up. Right now, those scales were flickering in an unusual pattern. The dragon's head twitched slightly, and Taeho heard a low sound that might have been pain. The readings show stress in the nervous system, Taeho insisted. If we don't check the connections, the whole neural network could burn out. Krexnine grabbed Taeho's shoulder with a clawed hand. Listen carefully, human. You were hired to fix wires and replace power cells. You were not hired to care about these animals. Do your job and nothing else. The Vorthok supervisor walked away, his heavy boots echoing in the large chamber. Taeho was alone with the dragon again. He looked at his tablet once more. The power spikes were getting worse. Whatever was wrong with Ember's implants, it was getting worse fast. Taeho had learned about the dragons during his first week on the ship. The Vortex had captured them from a distant planet and turned them into living weapons. They put computer chips in the dragon's brains and ran electrical cables through their bodies. The cables could deliver massive shocks that would force the dragons to obey commands. The dragons could breathe fire, fly through space, and even generate electromagnetic pulses that could disable enemy ships. But Taeho had spent months working around these creatures, and he had started to notice things. Sometimes the dragons would look at him with what seemed like intelligence. Sometimes they would make sounds that sounded almost like language. The other humans on the ship, Nari Park and Dr. Lee, had mentioned similar observations. Now as Taeho watched Ember's scales flicker with unstable energy, he made a decision that would change everything. He opened his toolkit and pulled out a pair of wire cutters. The main electrical conduit ran from the wall into a junction box mounted on Ember's neck. 3 thick cables carried the control signals that kept the dragon obedient and compliant. Taeho had installed these connections himself 6 months ago. His hands shook as he positioned the cutters around the first cable. If Krexnine caught him, he would probably be thrown out an airlock. But the power readings showed that Ember was in real pain. The neural implants were burning out the dragon's natural nervous system. Taeho cut the first wire. Immediately, the red lights on Ember's neck began flashing faster. The dragon's eyes snapped open. They were large and golden, with an intelligence that made Taeho's breath catch in his throat. For a moment, human and dragon stared at each other. Then Taeho cut the second wire. Ember's head lifted off the metal floor. The dragon's mouth opened, showing rows of sharp teeth. But instead of attacking, the creature made a sound that was almost like a sigh of relief. The flickering in its scales began to slow down. Taeho reached for the third and final control cable. This was the main neural interface that kept the dragon's mind suppressed. Once he cut this wire, there would be no going back. He squeezed the cutters. The third cable snapped apart with a shower of sparks. Ember's entire body convulsed as the control systems shut down. The dragon's eyes rolled back, then focused again, with a clarity that hadn't been there before. For several seconds, nothing happened. Taeho wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Then Ember roared. The sound was so loud that Taeho's ears rang. Emergency alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The dragon's body glowed with natural bioelectric energy as it stood up for the first time in months. Its wings, which had been folded tight against its body, spread out to their full 40-foot span. The metal restraints that had held Ember to the floor snapped like twigs. The dragon turned its massive head toward Taeho, and for a terrifying moment, the human thought he was about to die. Instead, Ember looked at the broken cables, then back at Taeho. The dragon's expression seemed almost grateful. Then the containment field around the Dragon Bay flickered and died. The ship's power grid, designed to handle controlled dragon energy, couldn't cope with Ember's natural bioelectric field. Lights went out across the entire section. Emergency barriers slammed down, sealing the Dragon Bay from the rest of the ship. Tae-Ho found himself trapped in a room with a fully awakened space dragon and no way out. But as he looked into Ember's intelligent golden eyes, he realized that cutting those wires had been the right thing to do. Whatever happened next, at least one creature was free from pain. The ship shuddered as more systems failed. In the distance, Taeho could hear other dragons beginning to roar. Ember's awakening was somehow affecting the entire dragon population. Aboard the ship, Taeho smiled grimly. Krex9 had been wrong about one thing. The dragons were much more than just weapons. And now, thanks to 3 snipped wires, the Vorthok Empire was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The emergency lights cast red shadows across the Dragon Bay as Taeho pressed his back against the metal wall. Ember stood in the center of the room, golden eyes scanning the space with new awareness. The dragon's scales no longer flickered with artificial energy. Instead, they glowed with a steady, natural light that seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. The sealed door behind Taeho suddenly hissed open. 3 figures stumbled into the bay before the door slammed shut again. Taeho recognized them immediately. Nari Park, the human xenobiologist, carried her research tablet and looked confused. Behind her came Vex 12, a young Vorthok officer with lighter green skin than most of his kind. The third figure was Zek 5, an older Vorthok engineer who worked in the power systems. What happened to the containment field? Nari asked, brushing dust from her lab coat. Then she saw Ember standing free, and her eyes went wide. Oh no, the dragon is loose. Vex 12 drew his energy weapon, but his hands were shaking. Stay back, humans. I will handle this creature. Wait, Taeho said, stepping between the officer and the dragon. Don't shoot. The dragon isn't attacking. Not attacking. Zek 5's voice was high with fear. These beasts are killers. They were programmed to destroy our enemies. Ember's head turned toward the group. The dragon's massive eyes studied each person carefully. When its gaze settled on Taeho, the creature made a low rumbling sound that wasn't quite a growl. I cut the control wires, Taeho said quietly. The neural implants were hurting it. Nari stared at him. You did what? Taeho, those implants are the only thing keeping these dragons under control. That's exactly the problem, Taeho replied. Look at its eyes. Really look. Does that look like a mindless animal to you? Nari had been studying the dragons for 6 months. She stepped closer, ignoring Vex 12's warning hiss. Ember lowered its great head until it was at her eye level. The dragon and the scientist looked at each other for a long moment. My sensors have been picking up unusual brain activity, Nari said slowly. The neural patterns are much more complex than we thought. But the Vorthok command told me to ignore those readings. Because they know, Taeho said. They know these dragons are intelligent. They just don't care. Vex 12's weapon hand dropped slightly. That is impossible. The dragons are weapons created by our bioengineers. No, Zex 5 said quietly. The old engineer was staring at Ember with a troubled expression. I helped install the first dragon systems 20 years ago. We found them on a planet called Paraxis Prime. They were not created. They were captured. The room fell silent except for the hum of failing electrical systems. Ember's head turned toward Zek 5, and the dragon made a sound that was almost like a question. You remember your home, Zek 5 whispered, don't you? Before anyone could respond, the lights flickered and went out completely. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, but the air recycling system had stopped working. Taeho could already smell the difference in the air. How long do we have? Nari asked. Taeho checked his tablet. Maybe 4 hours of air. Less if we panic and breathe harder. The emergency barriers won't open until the dragon is back in containment, Vextwell said, but the control systems are destroyed. Then we're trapped, Zek 5 said. Ember suddenly moved, walking toward the far wall where several broken cables hung from the ceiling. The dragon's scales began to glow brighter, and electrical energy crackled between its claws. Everyone stepped back, expecting an attack. Instead, Ember gently touched one of the cables with its snout. A small jolt of bioelectricity traveled through the wire, and a section of the wall panels lit up. It's trying to fix the power, Nari said in amazement. Tae-Ho approached the dragon slowly. You understand, don't you? You know we're trapped too. Ember looked at him and made a series of soft clicking sounds. The dragon moved to another cable and sent another pulse of energy through it. More systems came online, but the main door remained sealed. The lock is on a different circuit, Taeho explained. We need to bypass the containment protocols. Nari was studying her tablet. I am reading massive electrical activity throughout the ship. Other dragons are responding to this one's energy signature. They're talking to each other, Taeho realized. The dragons can communicate through the ship's electrical system. Vex 12 holstered his weapon. If that's true, then we have a much bigger problem. There are 47 dragons on this ship. No, HFY said firmly. We have 47 prisoners, and we are their jailers. The old engineer walked over to a maintenance panel and began removing the cover. I helped design these systems. I can disconnect the neural implants remotely, but it will take time. Are you insane? Vextwov grabbed HFY's arm. If we free all the dragons, they'll destroy the ship. Maybe, HFY replied. Or maybe they'll help us survive. But keeping them enslaved is wrong. I've known it for years, but I was too afraid to act. Ember approached the arguing voice. The dragon's golden eyes fixed on Vextwell, and it made a low sound that might have been sadness or disappointment. It's looking at you like it recognizes you, Nari said. Vex-12, single quotes. His face went pale. I was assigned to Dragon Unit 47 when I first joined the crew. I was responsible for its feeding schedule. You took care of it, Tejo said. Even when it was controlled, you showed it kindness. The young Vorthok officer stared at Ember. I thought you were just a weapon. But you remember me, don't you? Ember moved closer and gently touched Vex-12's shoulder with its snout. The contact sent a small spark of bioelectricity between them, and suddenly Vex-12's eyes went wide. I can feel its thoughts, he whispered. It's showing me images. A blue sky, mountains, other dragons flying free. Tears began to run down his face. It's showing me its home, the home we destroyed. Nari stepped forward. Tejo, if we're going to do this, we need to work together. The dragon's bioelectric abilities could help us restore ship functions, but only if they trust us. What about the Vorthok command? Vextwov asked. They'll execute us for treason. Only if we let them, Tejo said. He looked around at the group. A human technician, a human scientist, and 2 Vorthok crew members, all trapped with a creature. That should have been their enemy. We have a choice. We can die here as prisoners, or we can live as allies. Ember raised its head and roared, but this time the sound wasn't angry. It was a call to action. Throughout the ship, other dragons began to answer. HFY smiled grimly as he worked on the maintenance panel. Then let's free them all. The air was getting thinner, but Tejo felt hope growing in his chest. Sometimes the most unlikely alliances were forged in the darkest moments, and sometimes cutting a few wires was just the beginning. Nari Park held her tablet close to Ember's massive head, watching the readings with growing excitement. The bioelectric patterns flowing from the dragon were unlike anything she had ever seen. The energy wasn't random. It had structure, rhythm, and purpose. These aren't just electrical impulses, she said, her voice filled with wonder. They're organized, complex. This is communication. Tejo wiped sweat from his forehead. The air in the sealed Dragon Bay was getting thicker by the hour. You mean Ember is trying to talk to us? Not to us, Nari replied, adjusting her sensors. To them, she pointed at her tablet screen. Wave patterns flowed across the display, showing electrical signals moving through the ship's power grid. Each wave had a different signature, like a fingerprint. There are dozens of different patterns here. Each one is coming from a different dragon. They're all talking to each other through the electrical systems. HFY looked up from the maintenance panel he was working on. That's impossible. The neural implants block their natural brain functions. The implants control their actions, Nari said, but they don't completely shut down their minds. The dragons found a way around the blocks by using the ship's own wiring. Ember turned its great head toward Nari and made a series of soft clicking sounds. The dragon's scales glowed brighter for a moment, and Nari's tablet beeped with new data. It's responding to me, she whispered. Ember, can you understand what I'm saying? The dragon's golden eyes fixed on her face. Ember made 2 distinct clicks, then paused, then made 2 clicks again. 2 clicks, Tejo said. Maybe that means yes. Nari nodded slowly at Ember. Dragon immediately responded with 2 clicks. Then she shook her head. Ember made 1 long sound. 1 sound for no, 2 clicks for yes, Nari said, grinning. Despite their dangerous situation, we're actually communicating with it. Vex-12 had been standing quietly near the wall, but now he stepped forward. Ask it about the other dragons. Ask if they're all intelligent, like this one. Nari looked at Ember. Are the other dragons like you? Can they think and feel? 2 clicks, yes. Have they always been able to think, even with the implants? 2 clicks again. HFY stopped working and stared at the dragon. By the stars, we've been torturing thinking beings for 20 years. Ember's expression seemed to grow sad. The dragon moved to the wall, where several display screens were mounted. Using careful bursts of bioelectricity, Ember managed to power up one of the screens. Images began to appear. The first image showed a beautiful blue planet with white clouds and green continents. Mountains reached toward the sky, and vast forests covered the land. Your home, Nari said softly. That's Paraxis Prime. 2 clicks, yes. The image changed. Now it showed dragons flying freely through blue skies. Some were gold like Ember, others were silver, red, or deep purple. They moved in graceful formations, clearly working together. You lived in groups, families. 2 clicks. The next image was darker. Black ships filled the sky above the beautiful planet. Explosions lit up the ground below. Dragons tried to fly toward the ships, but nets of energy caught them and pulled them down. The Vorthok invasion, Vextwov said quietly. I remember the reports. The dragons tried to defend their world. The final image showed dragons in metal cages, with wires being attached to their heads and necks. Their eyes were dull and empty, nothing like Ember's bright, intelligent gaze. Ember turned away from the screen and made a long mournful sound. The dragon's scales dimmed with what could only be grief. I'm sorry, Nari said, reaching out to touch Ember's snout. I'm so sorry this happened to you and your people. Ember looked at her hand, then gently pressed its nose against her palm. The contact sent a small jolt of electricity through Neresa's arm, but it didn't hurt. Instead, she suddenly saw images in her mind. She saw dragons working together to build cities among the mountain peaks. She saw them singing in harmonies that created beautiful patterns of light in the sky. She saw dragon children learning to fly while their parents watched proudly. Then she saw the Vorthok ships arriving. She felt the dragons' confusion and fear as their peaceful world was attacked. She experienced the horror of capture, the pain of the neural implants, and years of forced slavery. Nori gasped and pulled her hand back. Tears were running down her face. What did you see? Taeho asked. Everything, she whispered. Their whole civilization. They were artists, builders, teachers. They had families and dreams and hopes, and we helped destroy all of that. Vextwell's face had turned pale green. I need to sit down. The young Vorthok officer sank to the floor, his head in his hands. My father was part of the invasion fleet. He told me stories about conquering a world full of dangerous beasts. He said the dragons were mindless monsters that attacked without reason. They were defending their home, HFY said quietly, just like any of us would do. Ember approached Vextwell and made soft, gentle sounds. The dragon lowered its head until it was level with the officer's face. When Vextwell looked up, Ember touched his forehead with its snout. More images flowed between them. This time, Vex saw himself from Ember's perspective. He saw the young officer bringing food to Dragon Unit 47, always making sure the portions were large enough. He saw Vextwell talking to the dragon during feeding time, treating it with kindness even when no one else was watching. You don't hate me, Vextwell said in amazement. Even after everything my people did. You don't hate me. 2 clicks. No hatred. Ember moved back to the display screen and created new images. These showed dragons and various alien species working together, building something in space. The image was fuzzy, like a dream or a hope rather than a memory. You want to work with us, Nari said. You want peace between our peoples. 2 clicks. Yes. But first, we need to free the others, Taeho said. How many dragons are still controlled on this ship? Ember's response came not as clicks, but as a complex pattern of electrical pulses that flowed through the walls. Nari's tablet lit up with dozens of different signals. 46 more, she said, reading the data. And they're all aware. They've all been watching and listening through the electrical systems. They know we freed you, HFY realized. They're waiting for us to free them too. Ember nodded its great head and moved to where HFY was working on the maintenance panel. The dragon sent a carefully controlled pulse of electricity into the panel, and several new circuits came online. It's helping, HFY said. The dragon is helping me bypass the containment systems. Taeho felt a surge of hope. If we can establish communication with all the dragons, we can coordinate the liberation of the entire ship. Nari was already working on her tablet, trying to decode more of the electrical signals. I think I can create a translation program, something that converts their bioelectric language into words we can understand. And then, Vextwell asked. Taeho looked around at their small group. 2 humans, 2 Vortheks, and 1 dragon, all working together despite everything that had happened between their peoples. Then we change everything, he said. Ember's scales glowed brighter, and throughout the ship, other dragons began to respond. The communication network was growing stronger. Soon, they would have an army of allies. But first, they had to survive long enough to free them all. The air in the Dragon Bay was getting thin. Taeho could feel his heart beating faster as his body tried to get more oxygen from each breath. They had maybe 2 hours left before the sealed chamber became their tomb. Nari had connected her tablet directly to the ship's electrical system through Ember's bioelectric field. Her translation program was working. Words appeared on the screen as dragons throughout the ship sent messages through the power grid. Helbus appeared on the display. Then freedom. Then home. They know what we're trying to do, Nari said. The dragons are ready to help, but we need a plan. HFY pulled up a schematic of the ship on his work tablet. There are 12 dragon containment bays. Each bay holds 3 to 5 dragons. The neural control systems are all connected to the main computer core. If we could reach the computer core, we could shut down all the implants at once, Taeho said. Impossible, Vextwell replied. The computer core is in the most secure part of the ship. There are dozens of guards and multiple security barriers. Ember moved closer to the group and sent electrical pulses to Nari's tablet. New words appeared. We fly. We break walls. The dragons could break through the barriers, Nari translated. But only if they're free first. It's a circle problem, Taeho said. We need to free the dragons to reach the computer core, but we need to reach the computer core to free the dragons. HFY studied the ship plans more carefully. Wait, there might be another way. The neural control systems have emergency manual overrides in each bay. If we could reach the other containment areas, we could free the dragons one bay at a time. But would take hours, Vexwell said. The ship's officers will notice the power fluctuations and send security teams. Ember's golden eyes were focused on the ship's schematic. The dragons sent more pulses to the tablet. We make confusion. Guards look wrong way. Nari's eyes lit up. A diversion. If some of the dragons create a distraction in one part of the ship, we could sneak to the other containment bays. What kind of distraction? Taeho asked. Ember's response made Nari smile. Bioelectric interference. They can overload the ship's sensors and communication systems. Make it look like the ship is under attack. Vex12 was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened his shoulders and looked at his companions. I know the guard schedules and patrol routes. I can get us past the security checkpoints. You're sure about this? Zek5 asked. If we're caught, they'll execute us for treason. They're already going to execute us, Vex12 replied. When Admiral Korth finds out that I was in this bay when the dragon escaped, he'll assume I helped. My only chance is to make sure the right side wins. Taeho felt a surge of respect for the young Vorthok officer. What about you, Zek5? The older engineer was staring at the ship plans. I designed half of these systems. I know exactly how to disable them. He looked up at Ember. I owe your people at least that much. Nari was working on her tablet, creating a communication network that would let them coordinate with dragons throughout the ship. I can stay in contact with all the dragon groups. We'll know when each bay is liberated. Then we have a plan, Taeho said. But first, we need to get out of this room. Ember approached the sealed door and placed its snout against the metal surface. The dragon's scales glowed brighter as it sent electrical energy into the door's control system. The lock mechanism sparked and hissed, then clicked open. Emergency. Air is flowing in, Nari said, breathing deeply as fresh oxygen entered the bay. The group gathered their equipment and prepared to leave. Ember would stay behind for now, coordinating with the other dragons through the electrical system. The plan was dangerous, but it was their only hope. Vex12 led them through empty corridors toward the first containment bay. The ship was on alert status, with most of the crew focused on trying to understand what had happened to Dragon Unit 47. That gave them a small window of opportunity. Bay 7 is closest, Vex12 whispered as they moved through the ship. 3 dragons. I know the guard. He's lazy and usually sleeps during night shift. They reached Bay 7 without being seen. True to Vex12's words, the single guard was asleep at his post. Zek5 quickly accessed the manual override controls while Nari established communication. With the dragons inside, they're ready, she whispered. They know what's happening. Zek5's fingers moved quickly over the control panel. Neural implants shut down in 3.2.1. Inside the bay, 3 dragons suddenly raised their heads as their control systems deactivated. Their eyes cleared and focused with new intelligence. One of them, a magnificent silver dragon, looked directly at Nari through the observation window. Thinky appeared on her tablet. Welcome back, she typed in response. The newly freed dragons immediately began sending bioelectric signals to their companions throughout the ship. The communication network was growing stronger. Bay 12 next, Vex12 said. 5 dragons there, but 2 guards. This time, they had help. The dragons in Bay 7 created an electrical surge that made it look like their containment field was failing. Both guards rushed to investigate, leaving Bay 12 unprotected. Zek5 disabled 5 more neural implant systems. 5 more dragons regained their freedom and their minds by the time they reached Bay 3. Word was spreading through the dragon network that liberation was happening. The creatures were getting excited, and their bioelectric fields were causing power fluctuations throughout the ship. Someone's going to notice soon, Vex12 warned, as if summoned by his words. An alarm began blaring through the ship. Admiral Korth's voice echoed from the speakers. All crew, to battle stations. We are under attack by unknown forces. Secure all dragon units immediately. They think we're being invaded, Nari said. Perfect, Taeho replied. That gives us cover to move faster. The next hour was a blur of activity. The team moved from bay to bay, freeing dragons while the ship's crew ran around trying to find an enemy that didn't exist. The dragons themselves helped by creating false sensor readings and communications blackouts. With each liberated bay, their allies grew stronger. Soon there were 20 free dragons coordinating their efforts, then 30, then 40. Finally, they reached the last containment bay. Bay 1 held the oldest and largest dragons, including one that the others called Blazefather through the communication network. This is it, Zek5 said, his hands hovering over the final control panel. Once we free these last dragons, there's no going back. There was no going back the moment Taeho cut those first wires. Vextwell said, "We're committed now." Taeho thought about Ember, waiting patiently in the original Dragon Bay. He thought about all the intelligent beings who had suffered in silence for 20 years, waiting for someone to show them kindness. "Do it," he said. Vec 5 disabled the final neural implant systems. Throughout the ship, 47 dragons felt the last chains fall away from their minds. For the first time in 2 decades, the dragons of Paraxis Prime were truly free, and they were very, very angry. The ship shuddered as 47 dragons roared at the same time. The sound echoed through every corridor and chamber of the massive vessel. Taeho felt the vibrations in his bones as 20 years of suppressed rage finally found its voice. "They're free," Nari whispered, staring at her tablet as bioelectric signals flooded the communication network. All of them. The celebration was short-lived. Heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor as a squad of Vorthok security officers rounded the corner. Their leader, a massive warrior with battle scars across his face, pointed his weapon at the group. "Stop, right there, traitors. You are under arrest for sabotage and treason." Before anyone could respond, the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, but the corridors were now filled with the strange, dancing light. The dragons were using their bioelectric abilities to overload the ship's systems. "This way," Vex 12 shouted, leading the group down a side passage as the security officers tried to navigate in the flickering light. Behind them, the sound of tearing metal echoed through the ship. The dragons were breaking free from their containment bays, using their natural strength to rip apart the barriers that had held them prisoner. "Where are we going?" Taeho asked as they ran. "The command center," Vex 12 replied. "If we can reach Admiral Korth, maybe we can negotiate a surrender." Nari's tablet was buzzing with messages from the dragons. "They're not just angry," she said, reading the translations. "They're organized. Blazefather is coordinating their actions." "What are they planning?" Zek 5 asked. "Revenge," came the simple reply on the tablet. They reached a junction in the corridor when the wall beside them exploded inward. A magnificent red dragon, twice the size of Ember, pushed through the opening. Its eyes glowed with fury as it looked at the group of small beings below. "Wait," Nari said, holding up her tablet. "We're friends. We helped free you." The dragon's head tilted as it studied the device. Then its expression softened slightly. "You are the liberators," appeared on the screen. "Blazefather sends greetings." "Blazefather?" Taeho asked. "The eldest of our kind on this ship. He wishes to speak with you." The red dragon stepped aside, revealing a tunnel it had carved through 3 decks of the ship. "This way, quickly. The metal skins are coming." They climbed through the improvised passage, following the dragon toward the ship's central hub. Around them, the sounds of battle grew louder. Dragons roared, energy weapons fired, and metal screamed as it was torn apart. "The crew is fighting back," Vex 12 said, his face pale. "Can you blame them?" Zek 5 replied. From their perspective, their weapons just turned against them. They emerged into a vast chamber that had once been the main dragon storage area. Now it was the heart of the rebellion. Dozens of dragons filled the space, their scales glowing with combined bioelectric energy. At the center stood the largest dragon Taeho had ever seen. Blazefather was ancient, his scales showing the deep gold of extreme age. Scars covered his hide, evidence of the battles he had fought before his capture. When he looked at the small group of liberators, his eyes held the wisdom of centuries. "Humans," his voice echoed through Nara's tablet. "You have given us back our minds. For this, we are grateful." "You're welcome," Taeho said, feeling very small in the presence of the enormous creature. "But gratitude does not erase 20 years of slavery. Our people cry out for justice." "Justice, yes," Nari said quickly. "But not all the Vorthoks are guilty. Some of them, like Vex 12 and Zek 5, they want to help make things right." Blazefather's gaze turned to the 2 Vorthok crew members. "You are the ones who cared for us when others saw only weapons." Vex 12 stepped forward, his voice shaking. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know you were intelligent. If I had known, you would have freed us sooner." Blazefather finished. "Yes, young warrior. We know. We saw your kindness even when you believed us to be beasts." Zek 5 bowed his head. "I helped build the systems that enslaved you. I cannot undo what was done, but I will spend my life making amends." "And what of the others?" Blazefather asked. "What of Admiral Korth and the commanders who ordered our capture?" Before anyone could answer, the chamber's main doors burst open. Admiral Korth himself strode in, flanked by a dozen elite guards. The Vor commander was even larger than most of his kind, with silver scales that marked his high rank. "Enough," Korth bellowed. "I don't know how you malfunctioned, but you will return to your containment units immediately." The dragons around the chamber began to growl, their bioelectric fields crackling with energy. Blazefather raised his head to its full height, towering over the Admiral. "We are not malfunctioned, Admiral. We are free." Korth's eyes widened as he heard the dragon speak through the translation system. "Impossible. The neural implants prevent higher brain functions." "The implants are gone," Taeho said, stepping forward. "We removed them. The dragons are intelligent beings, not weapons. You, Korth snarled, recognizing the human technician. I should have known. Humans and their soft hearts. You've doomed us all. No, Blazefather said, his voice calm but dangerous. You doomed yourselves the day you decided to enslave thinking beings. The Admiral raised his weapon, but before he could fire, every dragon in the chamber released a coordinated burst of bioelectric energy. The weapons in the guards' hands overloaded and exploded. The lights went out completely, leaving only the glow from the dragon's scales. You will surrender your ship, Blazefather continued. You will release all captured dragons throughout your empire, and you will face justice for your crimes. Never, Korth spat. I would rather die than surrender to animals. Animals? Ember's voice came from the chamber entrance. Teho's friend had finally joined the gathering, along with several other, recently, freed dragons. We built cities while your people were still learning to use tools. We created art that could be seen from space. We lived in harmony with our world for 10,000 years. Admiral Korth's face went pale as he realized the full scope of what the Vorthok Empire had done. They hadn't just captured dangerous beasts. They had committed genocide against an advanced civilization. The choice is yours, Admiral, Blazefather said. Surrender and face judgment, or fight and face destruction. Korth looked around the chamber at the dozens of dragons surrounding his small group. His elite guards were terrified, their weapons useless against creatures who could control electricity itself. You're making a mistake, he said finally. The Vorthok fleet will never accept dragon rule. They'll destroy this ship before they surrender. Then we'll make sure they don't get the chance. Blazefather replied. The ancient dragon scales began to glow brighter. Around the chamber, the other dragons joined their energy to his The combined bioelectric field was so powerful that it made the air itself shimmer. What are you doing? Korth demanded. Taking control of your ship, Blazefather said. Every electrical system, every computer, every communication array, we are creatures of living lightning. Admiral, your technology is nothing compared to our natural abilities. Throughout the ship, dragons were using their bioelectric powers to seize control of critical systems. The rebellion had become a revolution, and the dragons were winning. But Teho knew this was just the beginning. The Vorthok Empire stretched across dozens of star systems. If they were going to truly free the dragon people, they would need to do more than just capture one ship. They would need to change the galaxy itself. The Vorthok's pride drifted through space, its hull crackling with bioelectric energy as 47 dragons took control of every system. From the bridge to the engine room, their living lightning flowed through circuits that had once enslaved them. Te-Ho stood in the main command center, watching as Blazefather interfaced directly with the ship's computers. The ancient dragon's claws touched control panels that sparked and glowed with each thought the creature transmitted to the machine systems. Incredible, Nari breathed, monitoring the data flows on her tablet. They're not just controlling the ship, they're rewriting the entire operating system. Admiral Korth sat in the corner under guard, his silver scales dulled with defeat. Most of his crew had surrendered when the dragons demonstrated their complete control over life support systems. A few holdouts were locked in their quarters, their doors sealed by dragon-controlled security systems. What's our status? Teho asked. Ember, who had become the primary communicator between dragons and humans, sent a message to Nara's tablet. Ship is ours, weapons disabled, communications under our control, and the fleet. Vex 12 asked nervously. Through the observation windows, they could see other Vorthok warships in the distance. 12 massive vessels that made up Admiral Korth's battle group. They are demanding explanations. Appeared on the tablet, Admiral Korth was supposed to lead an attack on human colonies tomorrow. Teho felt his blood run cold. What attack? Korth looked up with cruel satisfaction. Did you think this was just a research mission? Human, we've been preparing to crush your pathetic colonies for months. Paraxis Station, New Terra, even your precious Earth. You're lying, Nari said. Am I? Korth gestured toward the command screens, which were now displaying tactical information under dragon control. Look for yourselves. The displays showed star charts with marked targets. Human colony worlds were highlighted in red, with attack schedules and troop deployments clearly visible. The scope of the planned assault was enormous. Millions of people, Teho whispered. Blazefather's deep voice echoed through the translation system. Now you understand the choice before us. We could simply escape, take our freedom, and disappear into the galaxy. Or, we can stop this attack and save your people. But Teho could hear the hesitation in the ancient dragon's voice. But stopping the attack means fighting the entire Vorthok fleet. Many dragons will die. Many Vorthoks will die. Is saving your colonies worth starting a war? The command center fell silent as everyone considered the question. Through the communication network, Teho could feel the other dragons waiting for an answer. Some wanted revenge against all Vorthoks. Others just wanted to go home to rebuild their shattered world. There has to be another way, Zek 5 said suddenly. What if we could expose the truth about the dragons to the other ship captains? Make them understand what the Empire has been doing. The captains follow orders, Vextwa replied. They won't listen to tales about intelligent dragons. They might listen to this, Nari said, working on her tablet. I've been recording everything, the dragons' communication, their memories of Paraxis Prime, proof of their intelligence and culture. If we broadcast this to the fleet, some might refuse to attack human colonies, Taeho finished, but others will just see it as Vorthok propaganda. Ember moved closer to the group. Golden eyes focused on Taeho. You freed us when you could have stayed safe. Now we ask, what would you have us do? The weight of the decision pressed down on Taeho's shoulders. He thought about the human colonies, full of families and children who had no idea death was coming for them. He thought about the dragons, who had already suffered so much and deserved their freedom. He thought about the Vorthok crew members like Vex-12 and Zex-5 who were trying to do the right thing. I can't make this choice for you, he said finally, but I can tell you what I believe. The dragons of Paraxis Prime were peaceful people. Before the Vortex attacked them, they built beautiful cities and created amazing art. They were better than their enemies. Blazefather's scales glowed brighter. You ask us to be better than those who enslaved us. I ask you to be who you really are, Taeho replied. Not weapons, not slaves, but the wise and noble people you've always been. The ancient dragon was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to address all the dragons through the bioelectric network. The conversation that followed was visible on Nara's tablet as rapid exchanges of light and energy. Finally, Blazefather spoke again. We have decided, we will stop the attack on your colonies. But we will not slaughter the Vorthok crews unless they force us to. How? Vex-12 asked. We disabled their ships without destroying them, Ember explained through the tablet. Dragons are creatures of precision. We can target specific systems, leave life support intact, strand the fleet without killing anyone. And then Admiral Korth asked from his corner. Then we broadcast the truth, Nari said. Show the galaxy what really happened on Paraxis Prime. Let every Vorthok citizen decide if they want to be part of an empire built on genocide. Some will choose to keep fighting, Blazefather acknowledged, but perhaps others will choose differently. The plan was ambitious and dangerous. The dragons would have to coordinate a simultaneous attack on 12 warships, disabling them before they could scatter or call for reinforcements. If even one ship escaped, it could warn the rest of the Vorthok Empire about the Dragon Rebellion. Are you sure about this? Taeho asked Ember. Once we start, there's no going back. We passed the point of no return when you cut those first wires, Ember replied. Now we finish what you started. The dragons spread throughout the ship, taking positions at key control points. Their bioelectric fields merged into a single, massive network of living energy. For the first time in 20 years, the dragons of Paraxis Prime were working together as one people. Beginning approach to the fleet, Blazefather announced. All ships are hailing us, demanding status reports. What should we tell them? Vex-12 asked. Admiral Korth looked up with bitter laughter. Tell them the truth. Tell them their weapons have turned against them. Tell them that 20 years of slavery has finally come to an end. On the tactical display, the 12 warships were moving into attack formation. They still thought the Vortex Pride was under Admiral Korth's command, but their sensors were detecting unusual energy readings. They're getting suspicious, Nari reported. 3 ships are charging weapons. Then we begin, Blazefather said. The dragons struck like lightning made flesh. Bioelectric energy lanced out from the Vortex Pride, hitting each enemy ship. With surgical precision, weapon systems overloaded. Engine cores shut down, communication arrays sparked and died. On less than 30 seconds, the entire Vorthok fleet was disabled and drifting helplessly in space. Incredible, Zek-5 whispered. They're completely helpless, but alive, Taeho noted, checking life support readings from the disabled ships. The dragons kept their word. Now came the hard part. They had stopped the attack on human colonies and captured an entire Vorthok fleet. But the real battle was just beginning. They had to convince a galaxy that dragons were people, not weapons. And somewhere in the depths of space, the rest of the Vorthok Empire was waiting. 6 months later, Taeho Kim stood on the observation deck of Dragonhaven, the first joint human-dragon space station. Through the transparent walls, he could see dragons and humans working together to install the station's final components. Their movements were graceful and coordinated, like a dance that had been practiced for years rather than months. The bioelectric generators are working perfectly, Nari Park reported, joining him at the window. She now wore the uniform of the newly formed Galactic Cooperation Council, with patches representing both Earth and Paraxis Prime. The dragon's natural energy is powering half the station, and the other half, Taeho asked. Clean fusion reactors, designed by Vorthok engineers, she replied with a smile. Zek-5's team has been amazing. They're more creative when they're not building weapons. Through the communication network that now connected all 3 species, Ember's voice reached them. The last structural beam is in place. Dragonhaven is complete. Taeho felt a surge of pride and satisfaction. After the Dragon Uprising, everything had changed rapidly. The disabled Vorthok fleet had been presented with a choice. join the rebellion or remain prisoners. Most had chosen to help, especially after seeing the evidence of what their empire had done to Paraxis Prime. Any word from the Vorthok homeworld? Taeho asked. Nere's expression grew more serious. Mixed responses. About half the outer colonies have declared independence from the empire. They want no part of genocide and slavery, but the core worlds are still loyal to the old ways. And the Imperial Council, they've declared all dragons to be dangerous rebels. They're offering rewards for any dragon captured alive. Nari shook her head sadly. Some Vorthoks are still trying to pretend this is all just a malfunction in their control systems. They'll learn, Taeho said confidently. When they see what dragons and humans can build together, they'll understand. A chime echoed through the station as Blazefather's voice filled the corridors. Attention all residents. We are receiving a transmission from Paraxis Prime. Taeho and Nari hurried to the main communication center. Dragons, humans, and reformed Vorthoks gathered around the large display screen as it flickered to life. The image that appeared took everyone's breath away. Paraxis Prime was healing. The blue sky was clearer than it had been in 20 years. Green plants were growing in the burned valleys. And most amazing of all, young dragons were flying freely through the air above rebuilt cities. My people, came a voice from the screen. It belonged to an ancient dragon, even older than Blaze, with scales that sparkled like stars. I am Sky Mother, eldest of our surviving clans. We bring news of hope. The image changed to show dragons working alongside other species to rebuild their world. Humans operated machines that cleaned polluted rivers. Vorthok engineers helped design new cities that worked in harmony with nature. Even species from distant star systems had come to help. The galaxy has not forgotten the children of Paraxis. Sky Mother continued, nations from across the stars have sent aid and workers. Our world will be whole again. Cheers erupted throughout Dragonhaven. Taeho found himself grinning as he watched dragons and humans embrace each other in celebration. But rebuilding is not enough, Sky Mother said, her tone becoming more serious. We must ensure that what happened to us never happens to anyone else. The Galactic Senate has voted to establish new laws protecting all intelligent species from enslavement. The Sentience Protection Act, Nari whispered. It passed. Unanimously, Sky Mother confirmed. Any species that can demonstrate intelligence and culture will be protected under galactic law. The days of treating thinking beings as property are over. The celebration grew louder. Vextwell, who now wore the blue uniform of the Vorthok Reform Movement, raised his voice above the crowd. This is what we should have been doing all along. Building instead of destroying. Creating instead of conquering. What about the Imperial Council? Someone called out. Sky Mother's expression grew sad but determined. The old empire grows smaller each day. More colonies choose freedom over tyranny. Eventually, even the core worlds will have to change or face isolation from the rest of the galaxy. After the transmission ended, Taeho found himself alone with Ember on the station's outer ring. The dragon had grown since his liberation. His scales brighter and his movements more confident. Do you ever regret it? Taeho asked. All the conflict that came from cutting those wires. Regret freedom. Ember's golden eyes sparkled with amusement. Never, but I sometimes wonder what would have happened if you had chosen differently. I would still be fixing broken machines instead of building new worlds. Taeho replied, and you would still be a prisoner. And millions of humans would have died in the planned attack. Ember added, your small act of kindness saved more lives than you'll ever know. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars through the observation window. In the distance, ships from a dozen different species approached Dragonhaven. Trade vessels, diplomatic cruisers, and exploration ships all flew together in peaceful cooperation. What's next? Taeho asked. Next, we keep building. Ember replied. The first mixed crew starship launches next month. Dragons providing bioelectric power. Humans handling technical systems. Reformed Vorthoks managing navigation. We'll explore new worlds together, as equals, and if we find other enslaved species, then we'll free them too, Ember said simply. That's what friends do for each other. A message appeared on Taeho's personal tablet. It was from Admiral Korth, who was now serving a work sentence helping to rebuild Paraxis Prime. Despite everything, the former Imperial officer had chosen redemption over continued resistance. The human technician changed everything. The message read, not with weapons or armies, but with wire cutters and compassion. Perhaps there is hope for old soldiers like me after all. Taeho smiled and showed the message to Ember. He's learning, too. Change is possible for everyone, Ember agreed. Even the most unlikely people can choose to do better. As if summoned by their conversation, Blaze's father approached them through the corridor. The ancient dragon moved slowly, but with dignity, his scarred scales telling the story of survival and hope. The council has made a decision, he announced. Dragonhaven will become the capital of the new Galactic Cooperation Alliance. Representatives from 30 species have agreed to meet here quarterly to discuss trade, exploration, and mutual protection. 30 species already. Nari had joined them, along with Vex-12 and Zek-5. The alliance is growing faster than we hoped. Freedom is attractive, Blaze Father replied. Once people see that cooperation works better than conquest, they want to be part of something better. What about Earth? Teho asked. Any word from home? The Terran Council has agreed to full membership, Nari said with a grin. They're sending a permanent ambassador next month. They want to learn everything they can about dragon biotechnology and Vorthok engineering, and they want to thank the human technician who saved their colonies, Vex-12 added. There's talk of a medal ceremony. Teho laughed. I just cut some wires. Everyone else did the real work. You gave us hope, Ember said seriously. Sometimes that's the most important thing of all. As the group talked and planned for the future, Teho reflected on how much had changed. A simple act of kindness had grown into a galactic revolution. Enemies had become friends, slaves had become free, and the galaxy was a little bit brighter because someone had chosen compassion over obedience. Through the observation windows, he could see the first dragon children born in freedom playing in the station's parks. They laughed and flew in patterns that were pure joy, their scales glowing with happiness. These children would grow up in a galaxy where intelligence was respected, where different species worked together, and where cutting the right wires at the right time could change everything. The technician who had once fixed broken machines had helped build something much more important, a future worth living in. And it all started with 3 simple cuts of wire cutters, and the belief that every thinking being deserved to be free.